Alright, this is me and Keaton's presentation on the JFK assassination. I'm going to start it off, do some background details about JFK's life, how we got the presidency, and then Keaton's going to take over and do a lot more fun stuff and other things. So, start it off with who was JFK? John F. Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States, serving from 1961 to 1963. He was 43 years old when he took office, making him the youngest elected president in United States history. Kennedy was known for his warm personality and charisma. One example of this was when he declared Eastman, Einberliner, and West Berlin to show U.S. support. JFK's early life and career. JFK was born on May 29, 1917, in a prestigious town in Massachusetts. Both of his parents were important figures, with his father being a successful businessman and a diplomat to the UK, and his mother was a descendant of a prominent political family. Kennedy was one of 9 siblings, creating a competitive household environment. He suffered health issues that would help him to build his determination. Kennedy would attend prestigious schools throughout his childhood and eventually went to Harvard University, where he studied government and international relations. After graduating from Harvard, JFK joined the Navy. In 1943, his boat was sunk by a Japanese destroyer, where he showed incredible leadership qualities which led him to being seen as a war hero during his presidency. After the war, Kennedy was elected to the House of Representatives, where he served 3 terms. After these 3 terms, Kennedy was elected to the U.S. Senate. Alright, JFK is president. In 1960, JFK was elected president over Richard Nixon in one of the closest presidential races of all time. And we got the map down here showing how close it was. The key ideas that JFK formed his presidency upon include the following: preventing the spread of communism, this is Cold War against the Soviet Union, promoting civil rights, ending segregation, equal rights for all, advancing space exploration, boosting the economy, and promoting world peace, especially with the Soviet Union. His leadership style was charismatic and encouraging. Even though he was charismatic and encouraging, he was still extremely calm under pressure. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, he made careful, well-thought-out decisions. Alright, major events during his presidency. Despite only being in office for a short time, JFK had many significant events happen during his presidency. The first major event that happened during JFK's presidency was the Bay of Pigs invasion, which this is a picture of that down here. This was a U.S. attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro. Even though the Bay of Pigs invasion was a failure, it would serve as a learning opportunity for JFK. Another major event during JFK's presidency was the Berlin Wall tensions. Kennedy stood firm in his support for West Berlin, showing his charismatic personality could also include firm leadership. JFK also had many other Cold War events during his presidency, where he would try to focus on maintaining peace with the Soviet Union and throughout the world. A good example of this was the creation of the Peace Corps, which sent Americans throughout the world to help with education and development of less developed countries. JFK also pushed the space race, vowing to put a man on the moon before any other nation, which was accomplished by the Apollo 11 moon landing. Of course, the last major event during his presidency will be his assassination. Alright, the trip to Texas. JFK traveled to Texas on November 21st to 22nd in 1963 for a few reasons. The main reason was to strengthen support among Texas Democrats and unify them around his ideas. Before arriving in Dallas, JFK also visited other Texas cities such as San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth. The trip was looking to be very successful and routine, as Kennedy helped to ease any political instability in Texas. Now we got the actual day here, November 22nd, 1963. This day was supposed to be just like any other day, any other rallies in Texas. Kennedy rode through Dallas in his open motorcade with his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. At 12:30 p.m., shots were fired. Kennedy was struck and was brought to the Parkland Memorial Hospital, where he was quickly pronounced dead. And this is Dealey Plaza. Dealey Plaza is a picture of it down here. Dealey Plaza is a public square in downtown Park area located in Dallas. The plaza is very significant to Dallas, as it is where Dallas was founded. Because of the significance, Dealey Plaza was the spot chosen by JFK for his motorcade to go through. After the assassination, the shots were determined to have come from the Texas School Book Depository, which I believe this is it up here, this big building, where Lee Harvey Oswald was positioned. Other theories hold that shots could have come from the grassy knoll, which is just a small hill by where he was driving. Okay. Okay, this is the assassination. While JFK was passing through the plaza, shots rang out at 12:30 p.m. Kennedy was hit and killed, being pronounced dead at 1 p.m. at the Parkland Memorial Hospital. So he was pronounced dead very quickly, 30 minutes. Immediate aftermath. Shortly after Kennedy was assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in aboard Air Force One at Dallas Love Field. Kennedy's wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, stood beside him, still wearing her blood-stained suit, which this is that picture, you just can't see the blood on it. Later that same day, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the assassination of JFK. 2 days later, Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby, which this is going to come in big for our conspiracy theories later. The aftermath of the assassination consisted of nationwide mourning. JFK was a very lovable person and president, and the nation expressed its heartfelt sorrow for the murder of the young president.
Lee Harvey Oswald was born on October 18, 1939, and was a former U.S. Marine who abandoned the United States to join the Soviet Union. He advocated for Karl Marx and the communist ideology. He was arrested for the assassination of JFK on November 22nd, 1963, but oddly enough, he maintained his innocence. And after this, he was killed just 2 days later by the owner of a local nightclub named Jack Ruby. What was Oswald's motive? It is believed that his motivation was a mix of desire for historical significance, his extreme Marxist ideology, and extreme feeling of disconnection from society, which is called alienation. He also was heavily resentful to authority because of his time in the Marine Corps, which involved many conflicts. One of these instances being that he was court-martialed, which means tried in military court, for the possession of an illegal weapon. Who was Jack Ruby? Jack Ruby was born on March 25th, 1911, and was the owner of a local Dallas nightclub, the Carousel Club. Ruby was an infamous character in the United States history because he was the one who shot and killed Lee Harvey Oswald. His motive for doing this, according to him, was to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the pain of coming back to Dallas to testify at a trial. He also claimed that he was distraught over the death, and because of the killing, Ruby was sentenced to death, but the conviction was overturned, and he died January 3rd of 1967, which was before his retrial. Lyndon B. Johnson became the 36th President of the United States after JFK was assassinated. He was sworn into office on Air Force One around 2 hours after the death of JFK. One of his main focuses upon taking office was to reassure and create stability within the American people, which basically means to make them more confident, considering that the previous president was assassinated. The Warren Commission was established to deep dive into the assassination of JFK. It was established on November 29th of 1963 by Lyndon B. Johnson. There were 7 members that included Senators Richard Russell Jr. and John Sherman Cooper, Representatives Hale Boggs and Gerald Ford, and former CIA Director Alan Dulles. It also included former Assistant Secretary of War John J. McCoy, and it was all being chaired by Earl Warren, who it was named after, a former Chief Justice and attorney. On September 24th of 1964, the final 888-page report was submitted to the president, with the conclusion being that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone and fired 3 shots from the Texas School Book Depository. They also found that Jack Ruby acted independently to kill Oswald. The public's reaction and acceptance of what the Warren Commission found has shifted over time. In the early 1960s, people had a lot of trust in the government and the Supreme Court, and by the late 1960s, the opinion of the public began to change. One of the reasons that this happened was because of journalists and authors like Mark Lane, who began pointing out like the evidence's inconsistencies, like the lack of motive that Lee Harvey Oswald had, and the single bullet theory, also known as the magic bullet theory, which is a central finding of the 1964 Warren Commission, stating that a single bullet fired by Lee Harvey Oswald from the Texas School Book Depository passed through President John F. Kennedy in his neck and caused multiple wounds to Governor John Connally. This theory explains how one gunman could create 7 wounds in 2 men within a short time frame. Another factor was the Zapruder film, which was first made public in 1975 on national television, which sparked an even more amount of controversy because a lot of people thought the way his head moved, which was back and to the left, suggested that he was shot from the front, when the commission said that he was shot from behind. To this day, public suspicion keeps rising, with some studies now indicating that 2/3 of the population believe the conspiracy, like some sort of conspiracy around it. There are many conspiracies around the assassination of JFK, one of the more popular ones being the grassy knoll theory. This theory suggests that Lee Harvey Oswald did not work alone and there were multiple shooters. The primary source of evidence for this was the Zapruder film showing his head moving back and to the left, like I said before, which is not where they said he was shot from in the Warren Commission, or in the final 888-page document. A second conspiracy is that the CIA was responsible for the assassination. This is because after the Bay of Pigs, which was a failed military operation on the southwestern coast of Cuba, in April of 1961, JFK reportedly made like harsh remarks, or like was just basically bashing, not in public but in private, the CIA, making the agency allegedly think that he was a threat to national security. A third conspiracy that was popular was the Soviet-Cuban connection conspiracy, which is basically because given the Cold War climate, many initially suspected that Lee Harvey Oswald was an agent working on behalf of the USSR or working on behalf of Fidel Castro, who was the leader of Cuba at the time. The theory was that Oswald was a self-proclaimed Marxist who basically chose the Soviet Union over the US. And a big reason for this was because he visited the Cuban and Soviet embassies in Mexico City just weeks before the assassination took place. Historical impact. The assassination of JFK was a shock that changed America forever. It ended a period of national innocence, if you will, and replaced it with deep distrust in the government that still lingers today. Ultimately, the tragedy forced the country to grow up quickly, moving from an optimistic 1950s to a much more divided and skeptical era that is still like taking place today. And then there are our sources.